What is uniformitarianism? Uniformitarianism is an idea that lets us do all sorts of science, like astronomy, geology, paleontology. Anytime we try to study something far away or long in the past, we need uniformitarianism. Its definition has shifted a little bit since it was first outlined by James Hutton in 1788, but its core can be summarized as the present is the key to the past. When he first suggested it, Hutton meant uniformitarianism to combat the assumption, which was common at that time, that geologic history was largely shaped by the biblical flood. Hutton proposed that rocks formed and eroded in an infinitely repeating cycle, and that everything always happens very slowly, caused by the same natural processes that we can see around us today. Of course, we now know that cataclysmic events do happen, and that things can change permanently. After 232 years of debate and tweaking, here's how we think about uniformitarianism now. Let's say I walk outside and see an outcrop of sandstone. I can see a distinctive half-teardrop shape in one layer, and if I look up close, I see ripple marks. As I think about this sandstone, I could come up with all sorts of explanations for how it got there. I could say that it was fairy magic. Why not? You might not believe in fairies, but maybe they used to exist and went extinct, leaving no trace at all. Irrational as it probably sounds, this explanation works. Magic can explain anything we see in the rocks, and nobody could ever prove that it wasn't fairy magic. The problem is that saying fairies did it doesn't lead me anywhere. It doesn't make any predictions or teach me anything specific about the world. It's kind of like debating whether Superman or Batman would win in a fight. You probably have an opinion on that, and we could talk and debate about it forever, but there's no tiebreaker. There's no way to support one side or the other with evidence that can be seen and touched with our senses. Uniformitarianism helps us to avoid these sorts of endless debates by limiting the sorts of ideas that we're willing to consider. Basically, we assume that the physical laws that operate here and now work the same way everywhere in the universe, and at every time throughout the past. Now, yeah, it's an assumption that we can't prove with evidence, which is something that scientists don't usually like. But it's also a good way to filter out the ideas that probably won't lead anywhere productive. If I assume that the sandstone was deposited by a process similar to ones in the present world, that will lead me to look around the natural world for analogies. And if I do that, it might lead me to notice that lots of river channels have the same cross-section that I saw in the rock and have ripples in their beds. A river did it is a better explanation because it leads us to a hypothesis that can be tested. More importantly, it raises more questions, like where does the sand come from? And why do the ripples form in the first place? And how does a river channel even fill up with the sand? What happens to the river after that? Each of those questions leads to more answers and, even more importantly, to even more questions. It might sound frustrating that every answer just raises more questions, but that's the nature of science. Scientists question everything, and the answers to some of those questions make our lives better.